Welcome to Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now you can learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property. Learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau with the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denisi, and Corker. He's a member of the Committee on Professional Ethics of the Bar Association of Nassau County and counsel to the Nassau Academy of Law. And now, here is your host for Law You Should Know, attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today we'll be discussing student loan forgiveness. There's over $1 trillion in student loans, and for many people, it's a big burden on them to try to pay them off. And our special guest is Christi D. Arkovich, and she is an attorney who deals with student loan forgiveness. She used to be on the other side collecting those loans, and now she helps people to try to make sure they're forgiven or mitigated. Christi, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Thank you, Ken. Hopefully we'll be having some tips for folks to reduce student loan tonight.
Yes, absolutely. And I know you're the go-to person. So let's start out. Someone is in high school and about to apply for loans. Are there any things they should do, if possible, at that stage to ensure down the road their student loans are most eligible for forgiveness or other mitigation programs?
Sure. Well, one of the things to do if they're in high school is try to limit the amount of student loans they take in the first place. That might be taking advantage of part-time jobs, work-study programs, scholarships, grants, you name it, and try to keep the debt down to a minimum. And then focus on federal loans as opposed to private. Federal loans do have access to the income-driven plans, which have debt forgiveness, as well as public service loan forgiveness. Private loans don't, and private loans also require co-borrowers. They have very high rates of interest, often close to 15%. I had one today that was 15.58. And when you get the amount of private student loan debt that we see out there with that kind of interest, it is virtually unrepayable. It's basically a debt for life. And the whole purpose of these forgiveness programs is so that someone doesn't owe student loans for life, and that they can get these paid off in a reasonable manner. So federal loans is what I'd focus on, and I'd try to keep them as minimal as possible.
And on the co-borrowers, whether it's a parent or a relative or someone else, they also are going to be stuck with that burden, aside from the student.
Yes, private loans do require co-borrowers in most instances. There are opportunities now that you can actually refinance to take it off of your co-borrower's name, but you have to qualify for that. And a lot of folks, unfortunately, don't graduate college, or their income isn't high enough, or their credit's impaired, so they can't get the co-borrower off. So it's very important when taking out the loans, make sure that you and your co-borrower understand the liabilities, because it can really hurt both parties. We do a lot of debt settlement, and we try to get very low percentages to be repaid on these private student loans. And it's harder for us to do that if there's a co-borrower, a parent or grandparent. If they're financially secure, that presents a settlement problem for us. And it's also a problem for their credit if our client, the student, ultimately can't pay the loan. So it's best for everybody to walk into that arrangement with eyes wide open. Now, federal loans, they don't require co-borrowers. There is something out there called a Parent Plus loan. That's a federal loan. It's not a co-borrowing relationship. It's basically owed by the parent or grandparent directly. And unfortunately, those have very high rates of default because there's not that income stream of 30 or 40 years working life for maybe a grandparent to repay a loan. So for those folks that have those kinds of loans, I really want them to take advantage of the income forgiveness programs. It's called ICR, Income Contingency Repayment. And it's calculated based on often Social Security income. So the payment can be very low. And so we run into a lot of consultations with people who are in retirement or nearing retirement, and they're becoming very fearful that they can't pay the loan. Well, if they use these income-driven debt forgiveness programs, they do have an out besides default and garnishment of Social Security and things like that.
And that loan will essentially be retired after a certain number of years?
Yes, the way it works is that it depends on which program they're in. Most of the programs are 20 or 25 years. And what we see is a lot of our older Americans, let's say they're in their 50s or 60s when they sign a Parent Plus loan. Well, if you add 20, 25 years to that, and usually it would be 25 for them, they're going to be well into their 70s or 80s. And there's actually another program called a total and permanent disability discharge. We haven't had one denied yet, so we're very successful in getting those discharges for the right clients. Someone who their physician is able to certify they're unable to work, they can actually get a full 100% discharge that way. So we have a lot of people who may not finish out the 25 years even. They'll get a discharge through a disability, and that's, again, only for federal loans.
Okay, and that's even though they wouldn't ordinarily qualify through bankruptcy. This is a special provision that allows them to qualify in a bankruptcy.
Yeah, no, this does not involve bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is very unique. Federal loans are generally non-dischargeable in a bankruptcy. It's extremely difficult to get a discharge for federal loans, and that's because there's a hardship, an undue hardship standard that's somewhat obsolete, but it's still in effect, and it just makes it impossible for the most part. Private loans are different, though. We are able, and we are currently doing a lot of discharge work for private student loans that are considered to be non-qualifying educational loans. In other words, they were direct to consumer, they have high rates of interest, co-borrowers and whatnot, but they also are taken outside the cost of education. So we think private loans, maybe a bankruptcy is a good idea. Federal loans, bankruptcy virtually never helps.
And when a student's in college, are there certain careers that may, or potential employers during or after college that may help them qualify for some type of mitigation or forgiveness?
Well, the income-driven plans, they're available for anyone in any field. And they're usually 10 or 15% of someone's discretionary earnings. So basically it's, your gross income minus taxes minus a reasonable expense number, and it's 10 or 15% left over. So the income-driven plans, they're available for practically everyone. They're usually quite reasonable. They are lengthy, though. It's 20, 25 years. And there is a potential tax issue at the end for the forgiveness of debt. None of these programs have been around long enough to see how much of an outcry there might be and whether or not Congress will change that and eliminate the tax issue. Interestingly enough, the careers that people choose that are public service, now there you can work in any kind of job, but your employer has to be a nonprofit entity, a qualified entity, or the government, state, local, federal government, whatever. And you can have, you can be an accountant for the county, for instance, or you can be a teacher. Doesn't really matter what you're doing. And that will result in what's called a public service loan forgiveness. There are a lot of hoops you have to jump through, and I can tell you more about that if you like. But essentially that provides 10-year forgiveness, so it shortens that time in less than half. And it's tax-free. There's no tax forgiveness at the end. So public service loan forgiveness, for those clients who know what to do and to do it right, it has an excellent result. Unfortunately, it's getting a lot of bad press. Less than 0.5% are qualifying for approval right now due to a recent study that came out. And there's a lot of problems between public service because the servicers, the federal loan servicers, I do not believe are doing nearly an adequate job of explaining the different hoops that people need to jump through. It's not that hard, but people don't know to do it. And when they don't know to do it, they're not qualifying.
And if they don't qualify, it's going to be their problem.
It is. It's their problem. And we have a lot of clients who, for instance, they were told by their servicer that they qualify and they just need to keep making their monthly payment. Don't miss one. At the end of 10 years, file for your discharge. Couldn't have been a bigger disservice because the loan servicer, Navient, Great Lakes, Nelnet, whoever it is, they should have been telling people, no, you have the wrong loan type. You need to consolidate to change to a direct loan. No, you're in the wrong payment plan. You need to be in an income-driven plan. No, you work for the wrong employer. You need to work for such and such. Fortunately, there is a form out now, came out in 2012. So the program, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, it's been out since 2007. So 5 years in, they finally created a form. But it's very, very helpful for those who know about it. It's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Certification Form. And every year, a borrower can fill that out, have their employer fill out their portion saying that they work full-time for the 12 months and so forth, and they'll get credit for those 12 months, and they'll know they're on track. They'll know they have the right loan type, they're in the right right payment plan, and so forth. So I strongly encourage everyone who if they think that they're eligible for public service, make sure they're filling out the certification form, not just the renewal of the income-driven plan, but the separate public service certification form that talks about the employer and such, because that's the only real way for them to know if they truly are on track. They should never take what is verbally told to them by a representative, because if they call 5 minutes later, talk to a different person, they might get an entirely different answer.
And does that, once you file the form, does the government or the servicer acknowledge that they've received the form and they are accepting the credit or forgiveness?
They do, and it's fairly quick. My understanding is about 30 days later, you get a letter back that says, okay, here's the number of months that you've paid so far, here's the number of months you have left, and it's tracked very nicely. And the form is not a perfect guarantee, but it's as close as you can get. And then you'd have basically 10 forms, 10 years, and then you would file your application for discharge after that.
And is the Department of Education involved in this processing, or it's all been outsourced?
They are to a degree. They have outsourced the servicing of public service loan forgiveness to a company called Fed Loan. It's a private company. But all of the loans have been converted to direct loans to be eligible for public service. And a direct loan is one that is issued by the government. So the government owns the loan. Unlike the older federal family education loans, FFEL loans, those loans, they were federal, but they weren't made by the federal government. So that's one of the reasons why they're not considered eligible. So the Department of Ed is involved. They create the form, the certification form. If there's any changes in the form, they change the form. They should do so only through permission from Congress and so forth. And they'll be the ones that are ultimately making the decision, although the correspondence will all be going through Fed Loan as their servicer.
Okay, and we talked about people going on for graduate school before, such as a lawyer or maybe a professor or a doctor. If they're working for some type of government or public service employer after their professional education, can they also qualify for similar forgiveness or mitigation?
Yes, the 10-year public service loan forgiveness program applies for grad loans, loans to go to medical school, law school, all of that. You have the same 120 payments based on your income, which under repay can be as little as 10% of someone's discretionary earnings. So it's a good program if you make sure you jump through the hoops to qualify. Absolutely. And we have a number of attorneys who are in the program, actually. Go ahead.
And are there other hoops that you want to mention?
Well, the hoops are primarily, the biggest one is making sure you have a direct loan. And the National Student Loan Database site, you can actually use your FAFSA, your FSA username and password, to confirm that you have all direct loans. We've seen some people where they have some FFEL and some direct. And so they think they're in public service because they're getting public service notifications, but not all their loans are in it. In fact, the majority might be the older disqualified loans. So it's best to get that report, make sure you have all direct loans. If you don't, just do a consolidation, put them all together. Now, there are some issues where you never want to put a Parent Plus loan in a consolidation with other loans. I won't explain why because it's too much detail for this evening, but it will drastically increase the payment per month. So you want to keep a Parent Plus loan always separate. But you can confirm you have direct loans. That's the first hoop. Second hoop, just make sure you're on income-driven plan. Any of them work, but it has to be income-driven, the kind that you renew every year based on your income. Third, they'd want to make sure they work for a qualifying employer. That's where the form comes in. Their employer actually fills out the form. It basically asks some questions about if they're tax exempt, what kind of 501c3 they are, what the primary purpose of business. It's a very short one-page form, but the employer can fill it out directly. We have a number of clients who come to see us, and they're very interested in the 10-year program. So they'll take this form to a prospective employer when they're interviewing, and they'll run it by the payroll department to see what would happen with their student loans if they took that job, if it's offered to them. So it's quite important. And then lastly, they want to make sure that they're full-time, which is defined as 30 hours or more a week. And then they want to make sure that they make the payments timely. Each and every month, pay on time, don't deviate, don't pay ahead, and then make sure you're employed at the nonprofit or government at the time that your application's reviewed. You can't quit. I think that some people will hit that 120th payment and they'll think, I've got this private job. They've been waiting for me. They can't wait any longer. I need to leave now. I don't know how long my application will take, but you got to stay at the nonprofit or government until the application's approved or it would be denied.
Okay, Christi, we got to take a short break now. When we return, we'll talk about how you and people can help people resolve problems with all those steps you mentioned and what opportunities there are for loan forgiveness or mitigation for people who don't qualify with those employers. You're listening to Christi Arkovich. She's an attorney in Tampa, Florida, and she helps people all over the country in reducing obtaining forgiveness of the student loans. You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College at 90.3 WHPC, also over the internet at nccradio.org. We'll be back in a moment.
This program is brought to you by Nassau Community College, which offers a paralegal studies program. Students can major in paralegal studies while earning their associate's degree, or earn a paralegal certificate if they already have a college degree. These programs can even help you start a second career as a paralegal. It's a program for anyone who wants to work in a law office assisting lawyers, the government, or a position in an insurance company. More information about full-time, part-time, days, evenings, weekends, or online courses is available by calling 516-572-7774 or by email at paralegal@ncc.edu.
Once again, we continue with Law You Should Know. From the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denise, Corker, and Sauer, here is attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome back to Law You Should Know. We're talking about student loan forgiveness and also mitigation and reduction with Christi D. Arkovich, and she's an attorney in Tampa, Florida, and helping people around the country with this process. Christi, is there anything else that people can do if they're not getting, they're concerned about getting acknowledgement of the forgiveness or reduction of the student loan?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention is during the break here, I heard that Nassau Community College is sponsoring your program. And I wanted to put a plug in for community colleges everywhere. I went to a community college myself before I went to a private undergrad and a private law school. And it really did help keep my student loans down. When I graduated, it was a 1-to-1 ratio. It was always pretty easy to repay, but tuition was a lot less then. And I think that a lot more people are moving back to community college now because they realize that they're regionally accredited. The credits are virtually transferable to any state school. And that's something you can't say for a lot of these for-profit universities and colleges, which we've had a lot of problems with, like ITT and Everest and Corinthian and such. So I think community colleges are another good way to reduce student loan debt so it doesn't become the type of problems that I'll see. So in answer to your question about other mitigation efforts, there's always the possibility of refinancing a federal loan to a private loan. It's very concerning to me, though, if someone does that without full knowledge of the federal programs that they could be getting rid of or not having access to anymore. Because when you have a federal loan, you have income-driven plan, so that means if you're not making enough money to make a full payment, you can always have a lesser payment and not run the risk of default. Avoiding the default in federal loans is very important because you can have a 25% collection cost added, as well as wage garnishment, Social Security offsets, and even tax refunds can be withheld. Let's see, I lost my train of thought there. The federal loans...
You also you will help someone fight collection efforts as well if they've reached a point where the loan organization is trying to collect the loan.
Yes. If it's in default on a federal loan, we rehab and consolidate those, bring them current, put them into an income-driven plan with that forgiveness. If it's a private loan, we can settle those out of court, usually for what they call pennies on the dollar, 20 to 30, 40% or so without interest. And then if it's a lawsuit, we can defend those as well. Sometimes that results in dismissal or a settlement, like I mentioned. And when you're not paying interest on these loans plus a reduction of principal, it finally ends up to be an affordable payment. So there's a lot of different things we can do. One of the other protections, this is where I lost my train of thought, disability protections. With federal loans, if someone were to become disabled, they can qualify for a 100% discharge. That doesn't exist for private loans, but if you choose to refinance, you're giving up that government protection. So one of the avenues, if someone wants to, is they can try to go for a lower interest rate with a private loan, but they do risk giving up governmental benefits like the income reduction and debt forgiveness and disability, and it may not be worth doing that. So there's analysis that we do to help.
Right, and when we talk about consolidating loans, we're talking about private loans. Once you cannot consolidate federal loans unless you leave the program?
No, the consolidation that I'm referring to is federal loans. You can never consolidate both together. Private's always separate than federal. And the consolidation is generally used to cure a default, bring it current again. It's also used to change a loan type from an older federal loan to a newer loan, maybe used to consolidate or reduce the number of loans and reduce the number of federal servicers. And so it's used for a number of different purposes, but it's always separate from private loans.
And you mentioned the value of attending community colleges. And if you work for a public community college as you're a professor, you work in administration, or you work in a public state college, are you eligible for the student loan forgiveness as working for a public employer?
Yes, absolutely. As long as you have the different hoops jumped through, like the direct loans and income-driven plans, absolutely. And you have to be full-time.
Do you see any changes in horizon on the types of loans or how the administration of those loans down the road?
Well, there has been a proposal by President Trump that was announced in last fall's budget, as well as about a month ago, where he wants to simplify the income-driven plans and eliminate public service. And I know it's going to get a lot of flack because of the elimination of public service, but in reality, it really would be doing everyone a favor. Because most people who come to see me, they're not in the right income-driven plan for them. They're in one. They don't know how they got there or why they're there, but it's the wrong one for them. There's a better one for them. And we see that less than 0.5% have actually been approved for public service loan forgiveness because they haven't met the qualifications. So if we have one plan and simplify all of this mess so that it's 15 years and you pay 12% of discretionary earnings, particularly if it's based on just the borrower's earnings and not their spouse, I think that would do a great service for everyone. And it would take some of the power away from the federal loan servicers who are not doing the best of job. In fact, the Inspector General's office about a month ago came out with a report that was a very scathing report, and it said that 61% of the time, basically, federal student loan servicers are not following the law. They're committing errors of different kinds. And the Inspector General came down fairly harshly on the Department of Ed, saying they needed to do something about it. They needed to create incentives and disincentives to make sure that the federal servicers were following the law, and they weren't currently doing that. And I don't know about you, but as a lawyer, if I don't follow the law 61% of the time in representing my clients, it won't be that long before I'm disbarred. And the Department of Ed really isn't proactively making sure that their student loan servicers are doing the best job that they can for the borrowers. So it is a bit of a problem out there.
And if someone is not eligible for all these programs, is there other programs which will help to forgive the loan after 20 or 25 years?
The disability that I mentioned.
Okay.
Other than the income-driven plans, those are pretty much all the debt forgiveness. So there is a specific one for low-income teachers. Low-income schools, teachers at those schools. It's more of a credit. You can get a credit up to $17,000 if you, I believe, have 5 consecutive years. We don't see a whole lot of that. And there are some individual programs out there per state. We don't see many of those in Florida, though. It's pretty much just the income-driven plans and the debt forgiveness through public service that we'll see.
Okay. And we just have a few minutes left in the show. Just tell us about what information is available on your website.
Well, we have a really comprehensive website. I regularly blog, and the blog includes new case law, changes in the law, tips and traps of what to avoid and how to do things to qualify for this kind of relief out there, whether it's debt settlement, whether it's forgiveness programs, and what. We also have a student loan resource center that helps provide information about the different programs. We have a consultation that we offer. We used to do it free. We have had to start a small consultation fee, and to explain that, we charge $175 for our consultation, about a half an hour. And what we do is that we have a guarantee for that, and we waive our fee if it turns out that the client hires us for services. The second thing is, if we can explain what our client should do and how to do it within the half an hour, then they've saved themselves having to hire an attorney, but yet they know exactly what to do. And then third, if in 5 or 10 minutes we determine that they're already doing all that they can do and there's really nothing else for them, then we waive the fee. And then the client has the assurance that there isn't something out there that they're missing. And that's huge, because we see a lot of folks out there, they don't know something exists. The servicer doesn't represent them. The servicer represents the creditor. They're not there for the borrower. And so just having that peace of mind, I think, is important. And again, it didn't have any charge at all if it only took 5 or 10 minutes. We usually are fairly quick on determining what the options are.
And are you able to help them navigate the bureaucracy if they're not getting correct or timely responses from the loan servicer?
Yes. The loan servicers don't play many games with us. It's not perfect. Sometimes we have to send in an authorization letter a couple of times, but we do get responses in our cases, absolutely.
Okay. Just give us your website one more time.
Sure. It's really just my name, ChristiArkovich.com. So it's ChrisTie, and last name is ARKOV as in Victor, ICH.com. Our blog is on there. We have a lot of news stories on there. We also have a free ebook. It's available on our website. It's called How to Take Your Life Back from Your Student Loans. Has a lot of free information about the options that might be available. That's the biggest part, is that people don't know what's available. And most people who contact me, they're very happy about, now they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they wish they'd seen us years before, because they'd be that much further ahead. So I welcome everybody to look at our website, see if there's something in there for them.
And it's important for everyone to perhaps plan their career path to get involved, take advantage of a student loan forgiveness program, or if they're in such a program, to make sure it's working for them, and do whatever they can to mitigate or reduce their loans.
Yes, we call it the don't put your head in the sand approach, and taking control of student loans. Much, much better results that way.
Okay, I would like to thank our guest, Christi D. Arkovich, and as you've heard, you can find her website, ChristiArkovich, and you've heard you can also arrange with a consultation, really a no-risk consultation with her if you think that's going to help her. But keep in mind, whatever present here today is as information only and not intended to be legal advice. You should get legal or financial advice from your own professional. And if you missed any portion of this program, it's available as a podcast at nccradio.org. You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College at 90.3 WHPC. Please join us next week at this time on the radio or over the internet, nccradio.org, for another program on Law You Should Know.